So it's starting. So first thing I just want to point out to you, and I cannot take credit for this, this is the semester that Rachel Ashman covered my class, because I had to drop down to 2 classes. So she taught 3D design for a semester. So she created this board, which has a bunch of different ways of constructing with cardboard. So feel free to consult this often, because I think it can answer a lot of like, how do I do this? So when I demoed the exercise, we talked about slot and groove construction, so she has a couple of examples of that and where you would make the cuts in order to create the forms. Those of you who might be interested in, needing columns or something like that for your project, I was telling Izzy on Monday, like, collect your toilet paper cores and your paper towel cores, because those are cardboard, right? So you could use those. But if you wanted to make your own versions, this is how you could go about it, right? So, cutting these little tabs into the bottom so that your column can stand up. So some of the things that I'm going to go over are scoring the cardboard, removing the outer layer so that you can create interesting textures, and how to get things to kind of bend the way that you want them to. But there are a few other how-tos on here for you to consult, and I'll just have this out for the duration of the project. Gio, can you come join us, please? Okay, so a couple of things, like in terms of how you're gonna go about constructing, presumably, like, let's just say, for argument's sake, that you're gonna do something that looks like a house or some other kind of more traditional architecture. You learned how to make a cube the hard way by cutting the paper, doing the folds, all of that. Now you're graduating to the project. So if you find a box that is the appropriate dimensions that you need, why make it all over again, right? So this is where you can kind of like cheat a little bit. So let's just say that this box, as it was folded up, like, oh, this is the perfect size, shape, dimension for, maybe not my entire structure, but like part of my structure, right? So start with that. What you might want to do is take it all apart. Like if you need to cut windows into it, that's going to be much, much easier to do when it's flat, right? So I removed all of the tape. And try not to cut all the way through. But if I unfold it completely, I'm going to have a much, much easier time of then, cutting out any openings that I need to see in my structure, and then close it back up. I really want you all to think about layers. So perhaps, this cardboard box, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, this is pretty ratty looking. I'm doing something that's very mid-century modern. Well, this might just be your armature level. So, just getting the basic structure, and then you would put other things on top of that. The other thing I want you to just start paying attention to are the different qualities of cardboard, right? So here we actually have a cardboard box that has a white layer on the outside, and then we have kind of the traditional brown on the inside. But even like the different colorations happening here, because cardboard is not made with acid-free paper, so it is going to change over time. But if you wanted to create a structure that shows a little bit of age and a little bit of you know, there are differences from surface to surface, a box like this might be really perfect for you because it's not clean and pristine. It's kind of starting to yellow, and you know, if I remove the tape, it's kind of pulling away some of the top layer, so it might give me that aged look that maybe I want. The other thing I'll point out is that this is this has corrugation in it, but it is really teeny tiny. So this is, just pass that around. So that's really, really thin cardboard with corrugation compared to like this little slice of the Amazon box that has kind of what you would think of as like the more traditional cardboard. And this might all seem terribly boring and like, why are we getting into like the particularities of cardboard? But for your project and for the different effects you might want to achieve, I think it's good to start noticing these differences. So the only cardboard that I don't have here on the table is just kind of like that single ply cereal cardboard. But there's one other element that could count. I'm going to allow this as cardboard, which is basically craft butcher paper, right? So I've ordered a whole roll of it. And I think that for those of you who want to create kind of a consistent skin or outer layer on your piece, that can be achieved through the paper tape, other kinds of tape, or with the butcher paper as well. I wish Diana was here, because part of why I'm doing the demo today that I'm doing is because I wanted to address, like, if you don't want to do something that requires super specific, rigid measurements, how do you build with these materials in a more organic fashion?
Can we make vehicles as well?
Yeah, well, you can. I mean, so remember, you know, Kayvon, you showed the image of that car by Chris Gilmore, and I think there were a couple of other project ideas that weren't strictly architectural or like strictly buildings, but they are structures of some other kind. So yes, something that is like a boat or a camper van or something like that is okay.
For the butcher paper,
Mhm.
you meant to glue it on top of cardboard, or
Yes.
use it as is?
Well, it depends. I mean, this doesn't have much structural integrity, right? It's very thin paper. So my thought is that most of you would be waiting. Oh, it's almost back around. So when you're done with that, Lucy, I'll steal it back. Thank you. So let's say this was my structure, right? And then I wanted to create another layer on top of it. I'm just going to tape this together very, not permanently, but then, I mean, this is all wrinkled, right? So this isn't like, this is not a great example for mid-century modern, which would require super clean and pristine, but then you might use this as a final layer. So even if you think about the way that your home is constructed, there's framing, which is typically wood, and then there's drywall on top of that, and then there's paint on top of that, right? So those are the ways that you're constructing. So something rigid for support, and then using various forms of cardboard and butcher paper to skin the exterior.
Well, I'm thinking folding, so
Folding
is
yes,
a lot easier.
yes,
with
and
this
so
kind.
yeah, absolutely. So I forgot about that, Amy. Sorry, but yeah, anyone else who is interested in folding paper, I think that this is definitely gonna make your life easier. Folding cardboard to do origami style folding is going to be quite challenging. So yeah, that would be fun. Okay. Let's see. So I think I want to show you some of these cuts and why you might do them in order to achieve curves. So when I'm holding up this piece of cardboard, can you all see that the corrugation is running, as I'm holding it right now, in a vertical fashion, right? So when you bend the cardboard, it's going to want to bend on the corrugation. Does that mean that you have to bend it that way? No, you don't, but that's going to be the way where you get the least resistance, okay? Let's say I wanted to do something that was more kind of a cone shaped. So what I would do, and I'll also demonstrate kind of safe cutting when I'm doing this as well. So we went over this when I was demoing the exercise forms, but when you're using a box cutter in this instance, because you might need a little something more heavy duty than the X-Acto knife, you never want your fingers in the path of the blade, right? I hope that part is obvious. And if you're using a ruler as a straight edge, make sure that your non-cutting hand is really pushing down and holding it firm. And then you're dragging the blade right alongside the ruler. And that ensures straight cuts. So the way that this becomes not straight is if your hand is not holding the ruler firmly enough and it kind of slides around, or you're not paying attention to the way that the blade is cutting, and you really want the blade up against the side of the ruler so that you're using that straight edge and taking advantage of it.
Has anyone got cuts yet?
Let's keep it relevant, Amy.
Sorry.
Okay. So I'm cutting not parallel lines, I'm kind of fanning the lines. Just to see what kind of movement that creates with my cardboard.
What if I know some of this holding technique?
What?
I'm like, the way you're holding this, what if you accidentally cut yourself?
If you're paying attention and cutting carefully, that shouldn't happen.
Alright.
So when I score the cardboard, I'm just dragging the blade pretty lightly. But when I'm cutting through the cardboard, remember that there are 3 layers happening. So I like to do it in like maybe 2 passes, right? So the first pass is just indenting the top layer of the cardboard, and then the second or third pass will actually cut all the way through. So now I have this with my score marks on a diagonal, and that makes it a lot easier to get this thicker material to fold on these lines. And the way that it will most easily fold is with the cuts facing outward. So like these 2 or like this one. And it might just take a little bit more muscle if you don't want to see those cuts on the exterior. But you can see now that it starts to really just form itself once you fold along those exterior cuts, the score marks. Now, if I don't want to see those, I still recommend that you fold with those facing out and then just reverse it. And you can even use the ruler you know, when there's not a lot of material left, you might need a little assistance to bend along that score mark. And now I have my form, right? So I'm just gonna bend it back the other way. And let's just pretend that I'm making a super organic form. The cardboard is just my armature layer, so I am not going to see any of this in the end. So I have full liberty to be sloppy with my tape. I just need things to hold together. And maybe let's make a companion piece for this.
Can I make a dome of this together?
I'm gonna demo how to do a dome as well.
Alrighty.
So once again, fold along my score marks. And then it's much, much easier to get it to curve. So we may have talked a little bit about the difference between kind of a singular direction curve and a compound curve. So something that is a cone or a cylinder, planar materials have a pretty easy time of doing that. But compound curves, like a dome or a sphere, those are trickier to do. But if you've ever, I don't know if I have any soccer players in the room, but if you've ever looked at how like a lot of sports balls are constructed, you know, they are spherical, but that outer skin, it's not just like one sheet of leather, right? It's kind of cut into these smaller chunks so that it can actually come together as a sphere. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. So let's see. I don't really have a plan here. I'm just I'm just winging this. But again, with the idea that this is all going to get covered by butcher paper, I don't need to be quite as careful and calculating. So then I could start taking some of this paper. Let's just say I want a really organic surface. I'm kind of thinking of, Cassie, what you did with your little cone and the tape, right? So kind of intentionally distressing the material. And if I'm ripping it up into smaller pieces, and then I can either with white glue or with hot glue. If you're gonna use the hot glue guns, please make sure to try not to get gobs of glue on the cutting mats. then you can start to cover the entire structure with this outer skin.
Is there colored version of these papers?
I'm sorry?
Are there colored versions of these paper?
No, you're working with the brown. That is your restriction.
Brown.
And just be careful, because these are not the low temp hot glue guns, so it's very easy to burn yourself if you're not careful.
Has anyone got a burn marks before?
Yeah, me. Who hasn't burned themselves on a hot glue gun? I think that's, yeah.
We have, I can read that.
Yeah, just shout it out if I'm not looking up. Go ahead.
Should we bring our own hot glue guns?
No, I have a bunch in the cabinet, unless you are really attached to your hot glue gun. You can feel free to bring it in, but I have plenty. Yeah. Hot.
Should we bring our own box cutters?
Yes. Do bring your own box cutter. I do have some, but maybe not enough for everyone.
Where do I get these box cutters? At Walmart?
Anywhere, any hardware store will have it. I'm sure Walmart would have it too. And so hopefully you can see with these smaller pieces of paper, even though I'm going around these compound curves, I'm getting good coverage.
For that specific technique we're doing right now, do we need to use the hot glue for that? Or
No, you could use white glue.
okay.
In fact, if you all remember back to your wire forms and you used tissue paper and you used the glue to cover that, like passing over this whole thing with diluted white glue might be a really great way of unifying the surface. But if you notice when you picked up some of your exercise forms, like sometimes the tape doesn't quite hold the paper shut. So this is a bit more like stay put, right? If you're using the hot glue.
With that kind of idea of mine of covering a white glue, could you, with the butcher paper, do sort of a paper mache style, or is that deviating too far?
No. In fact, that's how I'm going to demo
Oh,
the dome, right? Good. Okay. So I'll just cover a teeny tiny bit more, and then I'll pass this around so that you can look at it. Ouch. But if you think about, what some of you might have in mind for the project, like if anyone's doing a tree house with the tree, I think this kind of wrinkly surface could be really great for your bark, let's say, or just even scoring the surface of the cardboard and kind of tearing at it. That also can create a good tree trunk texture. Okay, so any questions about that way of building so far? Okay, so let's look at a real compound curve. Like, let's say I wanted to make, maybe this isn't quite the right shape, but if I was looking at like the Florence Cathedral and I wanted to make the great dome on top, right? I would find something that I could use as a mold and then build over it. And before I do that, I just, again, want to talk about the safest way to use these knives is to have a sharp blade. So if you've done a bunch of cuts and you notice that you're getting like jagged tears in the cardboard, that's a sign to you that you should change out the blade. These box cutters I really love because it's so easy to remove the blade. You just press down on this little button and the blade will slide out. And notice that these blades have two ends, unlike the X-Acto knife. So for each blade for the box cutter, you can use it twice. You just reverse it. And then when you're done with the blade, make sure that you either tape it up before you throw it in the trash can, or let's see, how many do I have in here? Yeah, there's you can put used blades in this little pill box, and these live in the white cabinet. Okay. So I'll get a new blade. I'm going to press down on that little button again. The annoyance of being
I hope your hands see
visually
Daisy.
impaired. Come on. Okay, there we go. So slide it all the way back and then let that lever come down, and it should be locked into place. Okay, so I'm going to use this as a mold and kind of build paper over top of it. But I want to be sure that my paper will release from the bowl if I get any glue on it. So I'm just going to cover it with a little bit of tin foil. In fact, I am going to work with the white glue. So Kayla or Kayvon, can you grab me the jug of white glue and a brush from the gray cabinet? The glue is that big jug. Try the other, like there should be like the big jug towards the back, or just any little Elmer's glue. Yeah, that one. And then one of the cheapy brushes, please.
Like this?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay, so to your earlier question, Gabby, about kind of doing paper mache style.
You need help from me?
No, I just need to whack this. Sometimes when we don't clean the edge of the bottle, it gets a little stuck. There we go. Ooh, real crusty. Okay, so this giant jug is a little awkward to work with, so I'm just gonna pour some out. And it's also gonna block everyone's view, so I'll keep it on the floor. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, again, work with the thinner paper, because I think that'll be easier. And I have a bucket of water. And how many paper mache experts do I have in the room? Okay, what are some of the important things about paper mache, like the process?
It needs to be fully saturated, the paper.
Uh-huh. Anything else that you've discovered along the way?
The ratio of water to glue is important depending on what you want it to do.
Okay, ratio of water to glue is important. Lucy, what about you? Any tips?
The pieces have to be a good size. If they're too big, it's kind of.
Yeah, so too big of a size, then we have that same problem of like when you were putting tissue paper over your wire forms where we get like lots of, you know, folds and seams that we maybe don't want to see. So here's one that maybe we hadn't thought of before, but torn edges
Oh, yeah.
are
You
key.
can blend them.
Yeah, so when you tear the paper, you get this kind of feathery edge. That is really critical to have when you're paper macheing because the torn edges adhere much better to the layer below than if you were to cut the edge. When you cut the edge, you're basically cutting the paper fibers, and that does not allow for the layers to blend well to one another. So that what I'm doing is definitely not traditional paper mache. Okay, I am just taking, I'm wetting the paper, but I am then taking the pieces and just coating them with straight up glue. Okay.
Also, number of like layers and stuff matters. You can't
Yeah.
just build up one spot.
Right, so making sure that you have overlaps happening is really important, especially with this thinner paper. You want it to have some strength. So notice that I'm really overlapping. You can't see.
Yeah, I'm looking at a nice blue bucket right now.
Well, you can't see through my bucket? Just for you, Lucy. I will. But you see how when I'm working with these smaller pieces, I'm able to get 0 wrinkles or buckles with the paper. So you can use planar materials to make compound curves, you just have to work in smaller bite sizes. Okay. So is this process making sense? Like you would do this over and over and over again until you build it up thick enough, and then when it's thick enough, you would, because I've wrapped this in tin foil, I'll be able to remove the dome from the bowl and then hopefully peel the tin foil away. But maybe if it's on the inside, who cares? Like no one's gonna see it, right? Okay, I think I'll continue to work on these during class while you all are working, just so you can see progress and how that might manifest. I think the only other thing that I wanted to share with you is, again, just kind of a textural thing where if you start to peel away the top layer of the cardboard, you will reveal the corrugation underneath. And for those of you who are, we had some interesting conversations on Monday about, you know, architecture that's falling apart or being taken over by nature, right? Like having a surface like this is going to be far more compelling to create that narrative than this side, right? Which looks pretty brand new and not beaten up. So play with removing the top layer if you want something that has a little bit of age to it.
Question?
Yep.
Is paper necessary for my piece?
I can't really answer that until I know for sure what you're doing. And when you say paper, do you mean the butcher paper?
Yes.
Yeah, again, I'll need to know what you're going to do for the project in order to answer that question. Okay. The other thing that I just want you to start paying attention to, like what inherently comes on your box, right? So if you are frustrated by the color restriction, and let's say you wanted to create frames, like if you start really noticing the nuances of your boxes, like this barcode over here, like that could easily, if you cut it out, it could become a door frame or a window frame. The little arrows and things like that, that could also be interesting to play with. What I would say to avoid are, you know, like using like the really recognizable logo brands of things, unless, I don't know, I've not seen super great results with those, because when we see logos or, you know, words spelled out that aren't relevant to the thing that you're making, is that that's all we see, and we don't see the actual, you know, building or structure that you're making. We're too drawn in by commercialism. And like I see, Annie, you grabbed one of the Quaker Oat boxes, right? Like, I would not use the Quaker Oat logo anywhere on your piece, like unless you were doing the Quaker Oats factory or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, you want to use the identifiable logos and things like that with moderation.
Okay,
And
so
I would recommend like disguise them a little bit.
has anyone tried to do that with the logos before?
Yes, and it was not a very successful project. Like, too many logos and not enough, we kind of see only the logos and not the structure.
Who was that one person who did it?
I'm not naming names.
But they didn't get what the grade did they get?
That's not relevant.
Okay.
Okay, so, any questions about, like, I hope that some of this kind of gives you a little bit of a starting point of how you can start experimenting, at least with the cardboard.
Can I rip the logos off like that one technique?
Yeah, you could take that top layer off where the logos are to remove them, but, you know, like, maybe the printed letters, if they were relevant, like, that might be advantageous, or you could kind of cut them up and they become other things, like, disguise them a little bit. Okay, yes, Lucy.
You mentioned paper tape,
Mhm.
only like the roll of brown paper tape.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to borrow that from you?
Yes.
Is there like whatever?
Yeah, it's all just in the gray cabinet, and if I have a pretty healthy supply of it, so use
Okay,
as much
I
as
was
you
like,
want.
I don't know if we have like a limit on how much
No.
we're allowed to use.
No limit on, I mean, the cardboard, obviously, we can find almost anywhere, but the butcher paper, the paper tape, the hot glue, all of that, you're welcome to use as much as you want.
Second question, with the paper tape, if we have, like, we're trying to make really, really fine details, and we
Mhm.
don't have like thin cardboard, or we don't have like a thick enough like brown, like butcher paper to use, can we put like cardstock, like paper, and layer the like brown paper tape or the butcher paper on it?
On top
and
of
then
it?
cut that
Sure.
out,
Yes.
cause it's still brown on the outside?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, yes. Good. Okay, any other questions of those sorts? Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording.